Friday night. Everyone's making plans, group chats are lighting up, and someone asks what you're doing this weekend. And you say what you always say, nothing much, just staying in. They respond with concern, like you've just announced something sad. You can't just stay home alone all the time. But the thing is, you're not staying home because you have no options. You're staying home because that's genuinely what you want to do. You've probably heard it your whole life, that you're too quiet, too withdrawn. They need to put yourself out there more or make more of an effort. And maybe when you were younger, you believed them. You thought something was wrong with you for preferring your own company. But somewhere along the way, you stopped apologizing for it because you realized that being alone doesn't feel like loneliness to you. It feels like coming home. Most people don't understand this. They assume that if you're alone, you must be lonely, that preferring solitude means you're antisocial, depressed, or running from something. But that's not what's happening. You're not avoiding people because you hate them or because you're afraid of connection. You're choosing solitude because that's where you feel most like yourself. And there's a specific psychology behind why some people are wired this way. Here's the core distinction. There's a difference between isolation, which is being cut off from connection and wanting it, and solitude, which is deliberately choosing to be alone because it nourishes you. Isolation depletes you. Solitude restores you. One comes from lack of choice, the other comes from knowing what you need and giving it to yourself. Research on personality and social behavior, particularly studies on introversion and what psychologists call solitude preference, shows that some people genuinely require less social stimulation to feel satisfied. Their brains don't process social interaction as rewarding in the same way extroverts' brains do. It's not that they can't enjoy socializing, it's that they don't need it to feel whole. And when they do engage socially, it uses energy rather than creating it. For most people who prefer solitude, it's not about avoiding something, it's about accessing something they can only reach when they're alone. Maybe it's clarity. When you're by yourself, your thoughts settle. You can hear yourself think without the noise of other people's opinions, energy, or expectations. You process your experiences, sort through your feelings, and make sense of things in a way that's impossible when you're constantly engaging with others. Or maybe it's creativity. Some people need solitude to create, to think deeply, to do their best work. The presence of others, even people they like, fragments their attention. So being alone isn't lonely, it's the condition under which they can actually function at their highest level. Or maybe it's peace. Social interaction, even positive interaction, requires performing a version of yourself. You monitor your tone, read the room, manage the flow of conversation. And that's fine in doses, but it's also exhausting. Solitude is where you don't have to perform anything. You can just exist without an audience, and that freedom feels essential. This shows up in ways that people who don't prefer solitude find hard to understand. You probably turn down invitations not because you don't like the people, but because you genuinely would rather be alone. And when you do that, people take it personally. They think you're rejecting them. But you're not rejecting them. You're choosing yourself. And for you, that doesn't feel selfish. It feels like self-preservation. You might also notice that after social events, even good ones, you feel drained, not energized. Everyone else is talking about how fun it was, making plans to do it again soon, and you're thinking about how long it'll be before you have to do that again. Not because you didn't enjoy it, but because it took something from you that you now need to replenish, and you can only replenish it alone. There's also this thing where you're selective about who you spend time with. You don't do casual friendships well. You don't do small talk or surface-level connection. If you're going to use your limited social energy, it has to be with people who are worth it. People you can have real conversations with. People who don't require you to perform. And if that means you have 2 close friends instead of 20 acquaintances, that feels like exactly the right trade-off. And here's something people misunderstand. You're probably not lonely. Other people assume that being alone equals being lonely, but for you, loneliness has nothing to do with whether someone else is in the room. You can feel lonely in a crowd and completely content by yourself. Loneliness for you is about disconnection from yourself, not disconnection from others. Some people who prefer solitude have built beautiful, fulfilling lives around it. They've chosen careers that allow them to work independently. They've created living situations that give them space. They've found partners who understand that needing time alone isn't a rejection. They've stopped apologizing for who they are, and they've built a life that actually fits them instead of trying to fit into a life designed for extroverts. But others struggle with it, not because they don't like being alone, but because the world doesn't make space for people like them. They're constantly being told they need to be more social, more outgoing, more available. They feel pressured to show up to things they don't want to attend. They feel guilty for declining invitations. And over time, that pressure makes them feel broken when they're not. And here's what determines the difference: whether you're choosing solitude from a place of knowing what nourishes you, or from a place of fear, fear of being hurt, fear of being rejected, fear of being seen. Because here's the thing, there's solitude that comes from self-awareness and solitude that comes from self-protection. One is about preference, the other is about avoidance, and they can look identical from the outside, but they feel completely different on the inside. Research on social withdrawal versus solitude preference shows something important. People who choose solitude and feel good about it show no signs of the anxiety, depression, or loneliness that people who are socially isolated experience. Their well-being isn't compromised by being alone. But people who are alone because they're avoiding connection, because they've been hurt, because they don't trust people, because vulnerability feels dangerous, they do show those signs. They're alone, but they're not at peace. So here's the question worth thinking about. When you choose to be alone, do you feel restored or do you feel safe? Because restoration and safety are two different things. One means solitude is giving you what you need. The other means solitude is protecting you from something you're afraid of. When you turn down an invitation, is it because you genuinely prefer what you'd be doing alone, or because showing up feels risky in a way you don't want to examine? When you're by yourself, do you feel content, or do you feel relieved that you don't have to try? And here's the harder question. If every single person in your life respected your need for solitude and stopped inviting you to things, stopped reaching out, stopped checking in, would that feel like freedom, or would that feel like abandonment? Because the people who prefer solitude in a healthy way don't need constant contact, but they also don't need complete absence. They can be alone without being isolated. They can enjoy their own company without cutting everyone else off. They have boundaries, not walls. And there's a big difference between the two. The world is built for extroverts, open offices, networking events, the more the merrier. But that doesn't mean there's something wrong with you for being different. Some people recharge through connection, others recharge through solitude. Some people think out loud, others think in silence. Some people feel most alive in a crowd, others feel most alive in stillness. And none of those preferences are better or worse, they're just different ways of being human. If this resonates with you, I'm curious what your experience is. Do you prefer solitude because it genuinely nourishes you, or because connection feels harder than being alone? What's one thing you can do when you're by yourself? Let me know in the comments. If this connected, leave a like so other people who prefer their own company can find it. And if you want more content on different ways of being wired, subscribe. You can also share this with someone who finally needs to understand that you're not lonely, you're just at peace alone.